And greetings and welcome to the QCast Season 3, Episode 11. As I've said a lot of times, one of the things I love about doing this is meeting people from the Division 3 world that I've never met before, and this is one of those moments. And with me, I have Ryan Cain, who's the head men's basketball coach of the Keene State Owls, currently ranked 14th in Division 3. And Ryan, it's great to finally meet you. I feel I've been watching your team for so long and have been looking forward to this, but how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Yeah. Thanks for having me on. I've been following your stuff for years. Really appreciate it. Thanks for everything you do for Division 3 men's basketball.
It's a pleasure. Again, it's fun to connect, and I'm really trying to make the QCast, more than about an Illinois Wesleyan CCIW Region 8 thing. And this is a great opportunity to talk about a part of Division 3 that I might not naturally have followed in the past, but have learned to, and have watched so many of your games this year. Let's start, Ryan. Let's just talk a little bit about your Division 3 story, because sometimes I interview people like coaches and they didn't come from Division 3. Like I had Coach Miller on from St. Joseph, and obviously his story is a little bit different. But you played at a Division 3 school. In fact, you were a superstar player at a Division 3 school. Talk me through, like, how did you get from being a high school player to ending up at WPI? I'm always fascinated by that kind of path. So walk me through how you ended up at a D3 school.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So I grew up in that Central Mass area. I grew up about 20 minutes south of Worcester, went to high school just outside Worcester. All boys high school in Shrewsbury, Mass. Very good basketball program there. So I actually played freshman basketball my first year there, played JV basketball my second year. I was a 6'4" man for the JV basketball team at St. John's in Shrewsbury. My freshman year in high school, they actually won the state championship. Had a really good group of guys. It was fun to watch. Rob Hennigan was on that team. He's a guy that had a pretty historic Division 3 men's basketball career, that had a run as the GM of the Orlando Magic that's still connected with Oklahoma City, I believe. And ultimately ended up working my way into the rotation in high school. We had a really good team my junior year of high school as well. We were undefeated actually until the state semifinal game. I was probably the 6th or 7th man on that team. We had 9 college players on that team,
Wow.
Guys who ended up winning national championships at Williams, Amherst,
Wow.
Lots of Division 3 players amongst that group. And then senior year had another really good team, went to the state semifinals again. Recruitment really picked up, obviously summer going into my senior year, and, WPI was among those schools that were reaching out pretty early on. They recruited one of my high school teammates, and got involved pretty early on in that recruiting process. And, for the most part, it was Division 3. My mother worked at Holy Cross, so there was some idea of possibly walking on there and trying to, play at Holy Cross and work my way up to the point that would actually, get minutes at Holy Cross. But through that process, it was pretty evident to me that I was a Division 3 guy. It was definitely a special level. Coach Bartley had just inherited the program at WPI. Now, at this point, he's been there for a long time. They've been, probably as successful consistently as anybody in the country over the last 23 years, whatever It's been during his run. But early on in that tenure, you just saw a guy that worked really hard, that absolutely loved hoops, that was really building something special. I think I watched those guys play 7 or 8 times my senior year of high school, and I don't think they won any of those games that I watched my senior year of high school. But you could just see, the foundation of a really good group of guys, the foundation of a program that plays hard. It had some really good options. It was really hard to pick WPI, but it always felt like home for me, specifically with the relationship that I had with Coach Bartley. Obviously a great academic school as well. But basketball was really important to me at that time, and I just found the right fit. And we got off to a good start. I think that Coach B went from winning, 3 or 4 games his first year, 7 or 8 games his second year, and then, got a couple recruiting classes under his belt. My first year, we ended up, that was back when Clark was awesome. They were winning the league almost year in, year out. They had Elite 8 runs kind of left and right, chances to make Final Fours.
Yep.
And they still had a returning solid group of seniors that year, and it looked like they were the favorite in the league. We actually, tied them for first in the league that year. We had the tiebreaker over them, so we won the regular season championship my first year there, and kind of started a streak of winning 20 games at WPI, and just had a great experience. I ended up finding the right place for me, the right fit with a great group of guys, the right coach, obviously someone that is a friend to me, is a mentor to me. Obviously I stayed connected with him after I graduated, had a terrific run, as a player, couldn't have asked for anything more. I thought about the overseas thing, but my career just ended in such a way that I felt so good about the way that it ended, and, wanted to get into coaching, but actually got into working as a wastewater consulting engineer when I first got out of school. And I did that for 8 years. And luckily I worked for 2 WPI grads. My path to become a head coach was a little bit different than a lot of them, in the sense that I was the part-time guy at WPI for 8 years, ultimately, before I got this position. In a big reason why I think I got this position was, Coach Bartley's influence and his ability to kind of support me through that process. And just found the right fit at the right time. I was hired as the interim head coach here at Keene State after a bit of a situation here at the college, unfortunate thing, but I was lucky to inherit a team that won the conference tournament, the championship the year before, advanced to the NCAA tournament, played Johns Hopkins in the first round, and got some tournament experience under their belt, returned the core of that team. And I was lucky to get this position. And, we played relatively well through my first year. Guys got healthy at the end and made a nice run and won the league again, got to a Sweet 16 and, kept my job. So that's how I am where I am.
Yeah, and WPI, just so folks know, you're the all-time leading scorer at WPI, which is a fantastic program. And not only were you a great player there, I mean, you won the Jostens Award, correct? Won the Jostens.
Yeah, it was
2007.
Yeah, 2007 Jostens Award winner. I'm a voting member of the Jostens Award Committee. So it's great to keep that connection with that group. Really fortunate each year to see all the fantastic individuals that represent Division III. It's pretty hard to vote for that award. I can tell you that, with all the good candidates that we have year in, year out. But privileged to win that. I think there's a lot of really good players across the country. And I think it's a testament to the type of program that Coach Bartley ran and the success that we had and the type of career ultimately that I was fortunate to have while I was there.
Yeah, I mean, the Jostens, for people that aren't aware, it's an award that's much more than about being a great basketball player. Community service and academics weigh heavily into that. And if you look at the list of people that have won that award on the women's and men's side, it's pretty impressive. So to have won that is amazing. I wanted to ask you too about your personal connection or D3 story that ended up at WPI, and turning down some other opportunities and some higher opportunities. One thing that I've seen in following Illinois Wesleyan is that Ron Rose's ability to have a kid that has higher opportunities and to genuinely explain why Illinois Wesleyan is the right path is huge. And you having personally made that same decision in your life, do you find that helps you connecting with young men who are making a similar decision on whether to go higher or to come to Keene State?
Yeah, I think so. It doesn't hurt, right? Having that perspective definitely helps through the recruiting process. In these days where our game is gone, I mean, Illinois Wesleyan is a prime example of a school that, had a couple guys leave, right? There was some opportunity for some of those players. Some of it was, the COVID stuff, but other opportunities were, to transfer up and play at higher levels. And that happens, with the type of players that we have here too. We had a kid, Ty Nichols, that was ultimately a first-team All-American, leading scorer in school history, best player probably in school history, playing professionally now. He was a guy throughout his experience here that had some conversations about, possibly doing that same thing. And it was really just weighing the option, like, do you want to put yourself in a position where, you're going to try to compete for a national championship, potentially be an All-American, be a candidate for National Player of the Year, put your team in a position where, there's lots of people talking about you, and also give yourself a chance to play professionally, despite not playing at, what is the highest level of college basketball. For us, it is our Division I. I'm sure every coach that you interact with, they run their program like a Division I program.
Absolutely.
It's high level basketball. It's no different. You see it these days, whether it's, your guy at Bentley, right? Like, look at those stats, look at those numbers, look at his impact at that level.
Yeah.
And even other guys that have gone to play at the Division I level, but definitely helps through the recruiting process. Obviously if guys are getting scholarships, in our region, you tend to see those guys take those scholarships, but the guys that, are kind of hanging on and trying to wait as long as possible, I think those are the guys that you can really work through those options with and encourage them that, it's great to make that decision and commit to playing at this level and the type of experience that you can have. And ultimately, if going pro is still your goal, it is, there is plenty of opportunity through this level to still be able to do so.
And you make a
but
really
obviously,
you-
oh no, I
you-
was just gonna finish. Sorry, yeah. But the reality is, like, it's Division III. Like, at some point, it's likely that all of our guys are going to have professional careers outside hoops,
Right.
and all of our guys get that, right? But it's neat to have some guys that do have that opportunity in the meantime to play some years over in Europe and have that experience, and ultimately still make some money while they're doing it.
You made a great point too that I just wanted to capture is that every Division III coach, men, women, treats their program no differently than any Division I basketball program. There is nothing lower about the way you have to run the program. And I think people understand that. People that don't know Division III have no idea about that. But
Right.
if you look at Division III programs, they're run just the same. They just have less money. The budget's less.
Yeah,
right.
it's all about the resources. It's all about who's
Right.
doing what,
Right.
and ultimately at this level, it's, obviously the coaches that are doing a lot more, there's not as much support staff there. And I think that's one thing that makes, like, our level, being an assistant at our level, so valuable is, everybody has the opportunity to do so much. Whereas at some of those higher levels, you may have more specific roles or more people to do more things. So they carve out specific roles for certain people.
Right.
Whereas at our level, you're doing everything and everything.
Yeah.
And I think that's a fantastic way to develop as a coach and a person.
Very well said. This is, I believe, when you add the interim year, this is year 8 for you. Is that correct with the Owls?
Yes.
Year 8. And I mean, you got things rolling right away when you got there. When I look at your record, the interim year, you won 20, 22, 19, 20, just rolling right along. Last year, you won 21 games, 21-7, 12-4 in the league. In the tournament, I believe last year was the year you beat Swarthmore, lost to Oswego, correct? So tournament team.
Correct.
What's this 8-year process been like, Ryan, in terms of building the program to where you want the program to be? You mentioned your coach at WPI, and as a recruit, you saw the building process. You saw what was coming, and you could jump into that because you saw it. What have the guys that have been watching your team play, what have they seen as this has been built?
Yeah, it's been a fascinating and fantastic experience. I was so fortunate to inherit the type of talent that I inherited. We had won the league, like I said, the year before, and pretty much brought that entire group back my first year as the interim head coach. There were some speed bumps that year. We had lots of injuries. We were cruising along 7-0. Things looked pretty easy early on. And then we had some injuries in that 8th game of our season. We had a guy tear an ACL. We had another guy break his hand. We had a guy have a herniated disc. It was the last game before break, and then over break, he had a herniated disc. So we went from playing, probably like 3 or 4 guys that were about 6'1". We were as fast and active and athletic as anybody. And then losing the guys that we lost, we went from 4'6" guys to 4'6" and above guys. And we went 6-10 over the next stretch of games that we played. Before we got some of those guys that were injured coming back. So we were 13-10 at one point after starting 7-0 and being a team that had won the league the year before. And then we proceeded to kind of win our last 8 games before losing to Christopher Newport in the Sweet 16. So that included the, back-to-back conference tournament championships. We went down to Stockton and won that year. We beat Middlebury in the second round after losing to them in the regular season. So just tons of talent that we had. I mean, we had a 7-foot center that's the all-time leader in block shots. The kid Ty Nichols, who's the best player in school history, was on that roster. We had a leader about as good as any leader that I had on that roster, Nate Stitchell. I could name 7 or 8 guys that are high-level Division III players that I inherited that I had nothing to do from a recruiting standpoint. And then that second year, we lost a couple of those guys, but just had, still a core of those guys return. And ultimately, we were able to get back into the NCAA tournament after a pretty successful regular season and actually play Christopher Newport in the Sweet 16 for the second year in a row. And that year we beat those guys in the Sweet 16 to advance and play Babson. So, though that group was a group of guys that I inherited that I didn't recruit that, hopefully I helped kind of develop a little bit more, but really fortunate to inherit a group of guys like that. And, Ty Nichols was with us. He was a freshman on that first team that I had. So he spent 4 years with us. And, obviously having a guy that is that talented to build your team around definitely puts your team in a position to be successful throughout his career. We had a lot of success, winning another regular season championship, conference tournament championship, getting back to the NCAA tournament his senior year. And then from there, after he left, we had to build it back up a little bit. When you lose a guy like that, that does so much, right? The stats are the stats. But a guy that has that kind of IQ that impacts winning in so many ways. I mean, he got every big rebound. He guarded every best player. He made every big play, every big shot, every big pass, So it was a little bit of starting over, and we had a really good group of guys to be able to do it. I think Jeff Hunter was a freshman on that team as we started over, and we were fortunate to be able to just commit to him and guys like him. And it's really hopefully helped him develop into the type of player that he is these days. And really the goal was obviously to bring in talent, but to try to make it player driven, and I think that's where we're at. If you look at our leadership on and off the court right now, these guys want to come to practice and get better. These guys are the ones saying kind of the coach speak to each other to really make sure we're consistently playing at the level that we need to play at, to accomplish some of our goals. And I think that's the key for our program, is taking that next step, the consistency piece, always being at that level and playing at that level and giving ourselves a chance every single time that we play. We've had some pretty good teams, but at times, there was some inconsistency in terms of the level that we were able to play at. And I think our way of trying to manage that is to really put the players in a position to own the program, and to try to do the right things every day and make sure we're coming to practice and making practice harder than games, and always every single day playing at the level that we need to play at, with still the goal of playing our best basketball at the end of the year.
When you look, Coach, at scheduling and how that's part of your program, you've now twice signed up to play in the Great Lakes Invitational, which I call the best tournament in Division III year in and year out. Ryan's done an incredible job putting that together. You played in that this year, and I want to talk about those games in a second, but what is your scheduling philosophy? There's a lot of chatter on those of us that are on Twitter about, teams that are playing great schedules versus teams that aren't playing great schedules. You clearly signed up. When you sign up to go to the Great Lakes Invitational, you're saying, I'm going to play two great teams. What's your scheduling philosophy?
Yeah, we've always had a very challenging non-conference schedule. If you look through the years, we're consistently, in a really good place, right? But at the same time, it's definitely an art and not a science, right? Like you can try to project and predict, and specifically now with all the COVID stuff, right, where you try to anticipate who may have a specific roster without knowing who's actually returning, and you look at that with some of the teams that we played, there was some opportunity for maybe some fifth-year seniors to come back that may have, shaped some of those rosters differently. But, you have to, especially with the way that, RRO has been kind of even inflated further with the way that it is reviewed in terms of primary criteria. Really have to make sure that you're putting a challenging non-conference schedule together to give yourself some opportunities to play in games like that. And obviously, some of it depends on the league that you're in, the status of the league that year, things of that nature. But, we definitely want to challenge our guys and play different type of teams in our non-conference schedule. I think that's something that had helped us through those early runs that I had in my career here. We had very difficult schedules those years. And I think those schedules put us in a position to play our best basketball at the end of the year and play against different styles. So you're playing Stockton in the first round and then Middlebury in the second round. And those are two drastically different styles in those games. And we had played teams like that throughout our regular season that year. So it's making the connection to those styles of other teams that we played and saying, we've done this all year. This is nothing new to us, but this is how we're going to approach that game. So it couldn't be more important to try to balance that schedule in a way where you're giving yourself those opportunities. And just to highlight the Great Lakes, I know we'll talk a little bit more about the matchups further, but I couldn't agree with you more. The job that Ryan's done with that tournament, I say the same exact thing about that tournament. That's the best tournament in Division III basketball. Obviously in terms of competition, but obviously the way he runs it as well is just absolutely first class.
Agree.
The host sites are just through the roof. The facilities are fantastic. They're so organized. They're so supportive. It's so well run. It's just been an unbelievable experience over our 2 years at that tournament. I tell Ryan all the time, if he wants to try to grab teams from the Northeast, I'm happy to be a spokesman on his behalf to talk about the quality of that tournament, to try to engage teams to participate in that tournament. It's just so well done.
My goal was to get my Titans there, and it finally has worked out. So Illinois Wesleyan's going there next year. It'll be the first time I've had a chance to go to the Great Lakes Invitational, which I'm excited about. But again, kudos to Ryan for what he's built. It is amazing. Let's talk about this year a little bit. Coming into this year, it was a very hard year to vote in the top 25 poll because of what you just mentioned about rosters. Like, no clue what fifth year guys might be coming back, or maybe like grad transfers to some of the teams that have grad transfers, or who left. I think that everyone knew that you guys would be a really good team based on what you had coming back. Can't remember where I had you in the top 25, but it was somewhere around 17 or 16, something like that. You ended up not in the top 25. Do things like that, some coaches it matters, some, like, do you look at the poll? Do you care about the poll? Were you aware that you weren't in the top 25? What were your thoughts coming into the year based on what you saw in terms of the rankings?
Yeah, in terms of rankings, it's one of those things. It's good or bad if you make them good or bad, like from a program standpoint. And I can elaborate on what I mean by that a little bit, but like it's bad, obviously, if you let it get to your head or if it impacts your ability to consistently play at a high level. It's good if you embrace it in the sense that, with that number, that ranking number, teams are going to give you their best, right? As soon as they
Right.
see that number next to your name, there's definitely, a sense of urgency that every single team's going to bring when they play you. And if your team can handle that the right way and manage that the right way, then you can use it to your advantage as well from that standpoint. It is something we talk about to an extent, right? It's something that, like, some coaches ignore it altogether and don't bring it up, don't acknowledge it, don't think about it, don't even, like, it's nothing, right?
Right.
And that's one approach. And my approach is a little bit different. I'm a little bit more direct with our team. I think our leadership is in a good place where we can have, conversations and be open and, put our team in position to, prepare to be ranked if it does happen,
Right.
and we talked about it in our first practice of the year. And we said, I have no idea where we'll fall in, preseason polls, but if, we're able to accomplish some of what we intend to accomplish throughout the year, there is the potential for us to get ranked. And talked about, what it's going to be like to kind of manage those expectations and handle that as a program and make sure that, if anything, it helps us and not hurts us with the way that we approach it.
And you shot up, right? So let's talk about those two games that got everyone's attention, where you went from getting votes to ending up number 14 in that week one poll. And that's what happened in Crawfordsville, Indiana. You played two really good programs. Maryville, you beat 78-69, Maryville of Tennessee, and Marietta, which is a perennial powerhouse, last year a Final Four team. You really beat them handily, 84-62. And I think it was that game that got everyone's attention. Marietta ended up beating Wabash in overtime, and you beat Marietta by 22. I'm sure you would say it was not an easy game, even though it ended up 22. But you had to have been thrilled, Ryan, with the way you played at Wabash that weekend.
Yeah, that was an important weekend for our program. It's our one chance this season to play back to back.
Right.
We didn't have that opportunity last year. We were supposed to go down to play in Roanoke's tournament. With COVID, we had to cancel our trip to Roanoke. And I think that would have been a pretty high level tournament. That would have been our chance to kind of simulate an NCAA tournament weekend. We talked a lot about this being our one opportunity to simulate what that NCAA tournament weekend looks like. And, obviously last year we were able to go to Swarthmore and win that first round game against a team that I have nothing but, immense respect for. Obviously their success over the years, making runs in the tournament, playing national championship games, the job that Landry does with that program. To go there and beat them in the first round of the NCAA tournament, obviously a great performance by our program. But then, I didn't think we played at the same level that second night, and credit to Oswego. I think they had a huge part as to why we didn't play the same way that second night. But we weren't able to bring it against two really good teams 2 nights in a row. So that was a huge emphasis for our program, making sure that, every day we practice at a high level. So when we get to the end of the year and we have to do it on back-to-back nights, we know exactly the type of team that we're going to be. But this was our one opportunity on back-to-back nights to be able to showcase our ability to play at a really high level. And, very proud of how our guys approached it. Over the course of 2 games, 2 great teams, 2 very talented teams. And I think our guys handled it about as good as we could have. and really appreciated our approach and the level that we're able to play at against two programs that are, deserve national attention themselves. That'll be very well respected throughout the year, I'm sure. Obviously Marietta coming off a Final Four.
Right.
I think our guys are Division III basketball fans, so they followed that run. They sent pictures of those Marietta guys and how big and strong those guards were, and use that to kind of fuel some of our off-season work as to what it's going to take if, those are the type of goals that we want to have. So, I think that was a weekend that our guys were excited for and did a good job in terms of the way they approached it and ultimately performed.
Two guys in particular, you have a very talented, deep team. I want to talk about the two guys that jump out the most. And as I was watching the games that weekend, certainly jumped out to me, in no particular order here. Jeff Hunter, your 6'7" senior, boy, he's a stud. He's averaging 22 points, 12 rebounds. He's shooting 719 from the field.
Yeah.
Talk about your 6'7" senior, Jeff Hunter. I mean, this guy is one of the best players in the country.
Yeah, I jump on Twitter every once in a while, and I forget who said it. You may have been involved in the conversation, and I think it was very well said. I think it may have been Ryan, actually. It was like always great, never flashy, super consistent.
Yeah.
Just one of the better, front court players in the country, and I think he summed it up nice. He's very fundamental. He has an incredible IQ. He's the quarterback of our offense. He gets us from one thing to the next. His footwork is as good as anybody. I mean, he can, find a little bit of space where there doesn't appear to be any space, and to his credit, Jeff came here as a 6'7" athletic guy with a ton of potential and had an impact with our program early on. And his commitment to the weight room has just been incredible. He literally, I think when our season ended last year, he had lifted 100 days in a row. And you can see it, like in the way that he plays. And to his credit, I think the biggest jump that he made this year is just the effort that he consistently plays with. I mean, he is so active on both ends of the floor. I mean, his rebound rate and radius is probably as good as anybody in the country. His impact at contesting shots around the rim, some of the things that show up in stats, but that may not necessarily speak towards his impact in a game. And obviously, IQ, there's no stat for that, right? So he just does so much for our program. He's a better person than he is player. He's a better leader than he is player. He enables the rest of our guys to speak up and also be leaders in our team. He knows what to say, when to say it, how to say it. And I think it's a little bit easier now for him, now that he is that example on the floor in terms of how hard you're supposed to play to be playing at a high level in Division III. So just so much respect for him and what he's been able to do. He's a senior, but he'll do the fifth year with us. So we're lucky, we'll have him back, so he's still, very much focused on, developing himself as a player. I think he still feels like there's a lot left there. He's got a lot more potential to continue to grow, but really proud of where he's gone as a player and person and leader in our program. And, a huge reason why we are where we are is definitely, Jeff Hunter and all the things that he does, whether it's statistical or whether it's things that you can't measure with stats.
And great point about footwork. That's the thing that stood out to me, is he's the perfect, when you talk about like a Division III post guy or forward, it's little things like that make the difference, that maybe in Division I you don't have to excel at. Maybe you're just so athletic. But in Division III, the Jeff Hunters of the world are the great players. And then you've got another guy. I think every great team I've ever seen has two guys that play off each other well. Almost they contrast. But you've got a 6'4" sophomore guard, Octavio Brito. Am I saying his last name right, by the way? Brito? Brito. Octavio Brito, who averages 23 points and 6 assists or 6 rebounds. He's shooting 481 from 3. And again, in Octavio Brito, you've got kind of a nice contrasting type player to Jeff Hunter. Talk about Octavio.
Yeah, there are two captains, and they actually even complement each other in terms of their leadership. Jeff is that IQ guy, and O is kind of that heart and soul guy, or at least was. I think Jeff has really elevated the way he's playing the game this year. But even last year, Octavio as a freshman, we had UMass Dartmouth in our league, and I think UMass Dartmouth was probably as good as any team in the country.
They were
aside from maybe Randolph-Macon, right? That's who they ultimately lost to. in the Sweet 16, and he was the guy that guarded Marcus Azor. He was probably, I think he was a first team All-American, as good as any point guard, probably not named Buzz in the country.
Right.
And we basically said, like, you're gonna have to guard him one-on-one for us to have a chance of beating these guys in the conference championship game. That's your matchup, and if we have to help you, we're gonna struggle. And he did a tremendous job. Marcus still played very well, just the type of player that he is. But Octavio pretty much handled him one-on-one by himself throughout the course of that game. And the same thing in the first round of the NCAA tournament against the prior, National Rookie of the Year, right? So that just Octavio, two-way player. I think that's the best way to talk about Octavio, is the impact that he has both ways. He's had a couple 30-point games, but I thought his game against Marietta, where he may have had 13, was as good, if not better, than either of those games. Just the way that he impacts the game in so many ways, similar to Jeff, is very impressive. He can guard any position. He can guard a point guard, he can guard a center, he can bang down low, he can slide his feet and keep guys in front. Just so active and, just very high motor. Doesn't take a play off. Just gives us so much energy on the defensive end of the floor. And then obviously to be able to combine that with, the ability to shoot 48% from three so far this year is pretty outstanding. And he's another guy that I think worked really hard in his body. He's a very physical guy these days, looks the part of a high-level Division III player. But just so impressed with his ability to, obviously play defense and then just offensively score in three ways. He's a true three-level scorer, obviously with that shooting ability, but he's a guy that can score around the basket. He's got, very good, mid-range games, got the ability to get to spots and make shots. And he makes tough ones, like he's one of those guys where you see him shoot some shots 12 to 15 feet around the basket that don't look like great shots. But for him, they're very high percentage. They're good looks. He's a guy that can get you a tough shot when you need one.
Again, several other guys we could talk about, as you have a very talented, deep rotation. And certainly, one of the great things about these interviews is someone's going to watch this and be like, I need to go watch those guys. And I encourage everyone to, because the way the Owls play is how basketball should be played. I want to ask you about your league. A lot of, I went to Illinois Wesleyan. I know the CCIW, and one of the things that I've loved about my time and learning more about Division III is learning about all the great leagues. Like every league has really great programs. And you mentioned Mass Dartmouth last year. I watched them a lot, primarily because of Marcus Azor and wanting to see what all the hype was about and learning it was legit and seeing how good they were. And you guys and Eastern Connecticut. Talk a little bit about the LEC for the people that don't know much about your conference. Talk a little bit about it.
Yeah, sure. In terms of like being able to give you a frame of reference, it's probably not all that different to some extent than CCIW, but you're not going to see the type of physics, like the bodies that you may see in the CCIW. But it's a defensive oriented, it's a physical, it's an intense, and it's aggressive. It can be a little bit ugly at times, with the way that some of the teams in our league really grind it out defensively. But through the years, there's been so many great programs, obviously like Rhode Island College with Bob Walsh over the course of his tenure there. And obviously they continue to be good, but just the run that they had while he was there, Elite Eights, Sweet 16s, year in, year out, being one of the best defensive teams in the country. There were points where our league was probably looking at 3, 4, 5 potential Pool C bids with the type of programs that we have in our league. Western Connecticut with some of the guys that they had, Daquan Brooks being a guy that's played in the D3 TBT several years, Fenton Bradley from Western Connecticut in recent years when they won the regular season and had a chance to beat Tufts at their place in the NCAA tournament that COVID year before it shut down the tournament. So that program's been terrific. They're undefeated so far this year. You have Eastern Connecticut that's probably been as good year in, year out in the regular season as any team, any league over the last 10 years. They're always at the top of our conference. They've won the regular season for a number of years. That gym is probably as hard of a gym to play in as any. The type of talent they've had and the job that Coach Geithner does with that program. Obviously we talked about UMass Dartmouth in terms of the success they had last year, but it's really been for years with those guys. There's definitely been a bit of a rivalry playing those guys several times in conference tournament games. And we talked about Marcus, but I think those guards as a whole last year were probably about as good as any in the country.
Crazy.
You don't guard Adam Seablum. He's a guy that's going to score 25. Jake Ashworth was a guy that could shoot it from the volleyball line. That team was, again, as good as any team that's been in our league, I think, through the years. But we've had teams that have probably been, top 5, top 10, just in the committee's eyes going into the NCAA tournament. UMass Dartmouth, probably no different. Eastern Connecticut, one of those years, no different. It was great to see those guys get in and make that Sweet 16 run last year. An incredible game with Emerson, where obviously
Right.
Emerson was up early to make that run, just I think speaks towards the type of leadership and character and talent in that program. The league's fantastic. And I think what I'd say is the depth of our league is what's impressive. If you don't bring it, it doesn't matter who in our league you're playing,
Right.
you're going to lose that game. And I think it's very true of our league this year. I think everybody is pretty similar across the board, where, it's going to be a dogfight to see who kind of finishes in what tier and who ends up where. 6 teams make our conference tournament. I'm not sure you could predict the 6 by any means. I think
Right.
all 9 teams have as good of a shot as any. So, really look forward to getting into league play. We start league play this Saturday. So we have 9 teams in our conference. So we get going a little bit earlier than some. I know some of the leagues have already started as well, whereas others kind of make that start,
Right.
starting in January.
And great point about the depth of leagues. I've always felt that a league is about how deep it is. When you have like a league where there's 4, 5, 6 teams that are really good. To me, that's a better league than a league that has one team that's rated number 5 in the country and everyone else is kind of ho hum. And so it's a really fun league to follow. Last question, then I'll ask for some last thoughts from you. But big picture, I don't know how much you keep an eye on the big picture around you in Division III. We talked about the top 25, but the cool thing this year is that the talent is so spread out. So as I'm looking at where you are, I'm looking at teams in the general vicinity of the map, the Williams, the St. Joseph's, the Rochesters. There's such a spread of talent this year. Watched NYU last night between teams in the Northeast, teams in Randolph-Macon's part of the country, the typical Midwest powers, Claremont Mud Scripps out in Southern California. Someone's going to come out of the Northwest Conference, whether it's Whitworth or Whitman or whoever. But how much do you look at like, hey, this thing's going down a road and there's going to be some hosting decisions to be made and some pairing decisions, and we really want to be the top seed here? How much are you aware of what's going on around you?
So the last part you probably don't think of or focus on too much in terms of like, especially this early, when it comes to, seedings and hosting and rankings and things of that nature. The best thing that happened to me was jumping on one of the racks, those regional advisory committees, which I'm actually on again this year, fortunate to be able to be our league representative for that. Because it definitely opens your eyes and you pay a lot more attention to your region. I think as you start doing that, you even start to get outside your region and start watching, some of these games in other areas to get a feel for some of those teams. During our season, I tend to be just a Division III guy, right? Like I'm not really thrown on a Division I game. I may have it on in the background, but the game that I'm watching is likely to be, it's likely to be one of these Division III games, whether it's in our region or out of our region. I want to have a feel for teams definitely within, Region 2 based on being on the rack and being able to speak towards, watching some of those games. Obviously, a lot of it is data driven. But even still, it's great to have a feel for those programs. I've watched, a lot of those teams that you mentioned, right? The St. Joe's, I watched that Illinois Wesleyan game a little bit while we're in the Great Lakes, sitting in the hotel, getting ready for our game, and it's really cool to see, different styles, different programs, different talent, different players, and make that connection. I do the NABC Reese's All-Star Game stuff too. I'm the nominating person or like selection person for our region as well for that. So it's also great to make that reference to other regions and other players, with our seniors in our area. But I'm a guy that loves to watch Division III hoops. I try to catch as much as I can and steal as much as I can, whether it's through podcasts, listening to, coaches from some of the programs that you just mentioned, or whether it's watching them play and stealing certain things that they do on the offensive or defensive end of the floor. Not sure I've invented anything, but hopefully tried to steal some good stuff from some good coaches. But definitely follow that. And it's more along those lines early on. And then obviously as we start getting into rankings, things may evolve a little bit there. But when it comes to how you manage your program, it's really just a focus on kind of that continued development throughout the year. and things are going to happen the way they're going to happen. You can't control that data to some extent. You mentioned
Right.
that, the parity of talent in teams. You can do your best to play as many RRO games as you can. But some of it is dictated based on your league, like the
Right.
UAA, right? Like look at that league right now. Everybody's undefeated in that league. Obviously, there'll be plenty of opportunity within that league for RRO, and it may not be the same in some of these other leagues. So there's only so much you can
Right.
do. And you can't get too caught up with it. You just have to keep doing what's best for your program in that moment. And everything generally will take care of itself the way that it needs to in that case,
And glad to know you're a D3 fan. I'm the same way. As I end up in a conversation on the golf course with my buddies about North Carolina or Kansas, and I have no idea what to say. My wife's a Purdue grad, so this is a big year for Purdue games to be on at my house, and I try my best. I'll try my best to be able to speak the Boilermaker language, but at the end of the day, I'm a D3 guy. I spend my free time watching D3 games and not D1, and glad to hear you're the same way. Ryan, this has been awesome, and so impressed with what you've built and kind of everything you're doing there at Keene State with the Owls program, ranked 14. Always like to give the coaches, my friend Dave McHugh taught me this, that you always give the guest the last word. And there's going to be some people tuning into this episode of the QCast that have never watched a Keene State game, didn't know Ryan before this. Give us some kind of parting comments that you'd like to leave people with here today.
No, just appreciate all of the support across the board, whether it's the coverage of, people like yourself and others that support Division III, and spread the word about, various programs through other regions and across the nation, and get that type of opportunity for marketing and exposure for our players. The game has really evolved over time with the ability to, get on social media and do more of this kind of stuff, whether it's just, the posting, the tweeting, the commenting, or whether it's these podcasts, or whether it's, the Hoopsville shows.
Yeah.
Obviously that was always a big thing, but to add all of the different things that people like yourself are doing, it's just fantastic. And I'd like to thank everybody. We have a special, community here. It's a real college town, for those that don't know about Keene. It's a quintessential classic New England college town. There's not a lot of places like this that are out there, and Keene is close to everything, but not near any major city, right? You could probably get everywhere you want in an hour and a half or 2 hours,
Right.
but there's no major city around us. So we're fortunate where, we're kind of the show in town. And our community is very supportive of us. Our campus is very supportive of us. We have a really cool Main Street downtown area, that people will go hang out before our game and then come watch us play. We have a club hockey team that's big on a Friday, and then we're the show on Saturday. So it's a really good place to be a, Division III student athlete. The campus does a terrific job of supporting us. Obviously, we're lucky to be able to travel to tournaments like that Great Lakes Invitational. Definitely encourage teams to do, things of that nature, right? We're likely to try to get back there, keep twisting Ryan's arm to try to get to another one, maybe that Calvin in 2 years. We have a professor here whose brother is the AD at Calvin. So maybe we'll try to leverage that to see if we can get ourselves back in that one. But it's just so thankful of obviously what we have here locally in our campus and in our community, but also the support of people like you and those who cover Division III and get the word out about our student athletes. It really makes their experience worthwhile, and they feel like it is their Division I because of the coverage that you guys have and the things that you guys do to support our game.
Well, we appreciate that. We're all trying to sort of complement what D3hoops.com built once upon a time. Pat Coleman and Dave McHugh and Ryan Scott and those guys. I think there's a group of us that sort of try to now complement that stuff with our own. We've talked about Ryan and the Great Lakes Invitational, the Snyder boys with the D3 Datacast, which is awesome. So there's a lot of people doing cool stuff now, and I think it's really helped the landscape. Ryan, thank you so much for doing this. And I'll leave people with this: is if you haven't watched Keene State play, you really need to check them out. They play the game the right way. They play hard, they play smart, and they're incredibly talented. Ranked number 14 now. Spoiler alert, I think they're going to end up being a lot higher than that as the season goes on. Ryan, thank you so much for making the time to do this today.
Yeah, thanks, Bob. Thanks for having me on. Nice to meet you in this fashion.
Thanks, man. We'll talk soon. Thank you.